So I'm Simon Shaw, I'm the Regional Director for Codurance in Leeds and Manchester. Just going to do a bit of housekeeping and kick things off, then I'll hand over to my colleague Matt. So yeah, just want to cover off a few bits on timing today. So we've got a brilliant panel, and we'll introduce them soon. We've actually split this in two. Now, obviously there's a degree of overlap here, but our first discussion will be around the impact of GenAI products and service development. And then the second one will be more focused on business automation and service delivery. So we'll finish those two discussions by about 1:30. Then we'll have some Q&A. So I'll bring up a QR code for you to submit questions at the end. And then there'll be some time for networking at the end. So we've got this room for a little while afterwards. So even at 2 o'clock, if you are able to stick around, then please do. Chat amongst yourselves and to us guys. Just to let you know, we are filming today. So Tom and Junior are filming today, so and we'll be putting some content on social media. If you want to get on the Wi-Fi, I'll leave this up for just a minute. So it's Brookwood Meeting Room, it's the network, and be our guest. No fire alarms due today. If it goes, it's the exit out here and downstairs. Toilets out here, left through the door, and we're all good. Just a minute or two on Codurance, if you haven't heard of us. So we're a global software consultancy. So we've got 8 offices now. Clearly Leeds is the premier office amongst the 8 that we've got. So we've been running for 10 years. It's our 10th birthday next month. And we're essentially founded on the principles of software craftsmanship. And if that's not a term that's familiar to you, and it may not be, we'll happily chat about that at the end. So I'll leave this up. If you want to submit questions as we go along, please do. I'll keep an eye on Slido, then about 1:30 we'll have Q&A. So we'll get going with the event. I'm going to introduce you to my colleague Matt Belcher, who'll chair the first panel discussion. So Matt's one of our principal engineers at Codurance. Been at Codurance for 3 or 4 years and has had a career in consultancy for 15 years. Matt's worked with all sorts of organisations, startups, scale-ups to much larger organisations, so a breadth of experience, and is also the author of an ebook on GenAI on our website. So you're in great hands today. So I'm going to hand over to Matt, and we'll get the panel discussion going.
Great, thanks Simon. Nice to be here in sunny Leeds today. We've got a great panel for the first discussion today. Alongside me, I've got Victory, who is a solutions architect from AWS, and I'm into the financial services part of the industry. So she does lots of work in sort of driving innovation through cloud adoption and through AWS services. We also have Lewis Ford from AirLogic, who is a principal architect. Lewis has over sort of 10 years experience of working with software and architecture across lots of different domains and industries. So a wealth of experience across both of you. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
So I guess let's sort of start with some definitions. So we hear lots about GenAI and machine learning and AI. I think it's worth just sort of aligning ourselves on what do we mean by GenAI, what is GenAI, and perhaps also what is it not as well. What do you both think?
Okay. GenAI is defined as artificial intelligence that can generate content, original content. And what it does this by reading and understanding the structure of the data it's trained by. So it generates new content by understanding that information, compared to AI that we know, which is kind of figuring out if is this a cat or is this a dog. That's kind of this job, is to try and figure out. It doesn't actually generate something new. It just does a function for you. So that's how I tend to differentiate it.
Yeah.
What about you?
Covered it perfectly. I think one of the kind of the big kind of leaps forward with GenAI was the ability to read natural language. So being able to give it prompts using natural language, just speaking to it like you would anything else, which changes it from kind of what it was, where you had to put in a very specific command. So like machine readable, do X then Y. I think that's kind of one of the big changes and the definitions of GenAI.
Yeah, great. I think there's lots made about GenAI, so I think it's useful just to kind of align ourselves on what we mean by GenAI before we sort of dig into the nuts and bolts of it. So I think having done that sort of definition piece, then there's also lots of use cases that people are talking about with GenAI. It's probably worth kind of going through some of those. So what do you both think about sort of potential use cases of how organisations could be using GenAI?
I'll start.
Yeah.
So I work in financial services. I look after enterprise financial customers, insurance customers. I'm not even sure if am I allowed to say the names? But yeah, they start with A and they're an insurance customer, and yeah, I'll leave that there. But they do a lot of work with. I mean, they run on data, so data is their bread and butter, and one of the use cases that came out from us discussing with them about Bedrock, which is an AWS service for GenAI, is summarization of insurance policies. Another one is comparison, so like classification of data. So you can imagine they have lots and lots of data. You want to be able to easily classify this, but also using insurance nuances. Because there are software out there that you can use to summarize things and classify things, but not specifically for a particular field. And this is where GenAI comes in, gets in, is a huge accelerator, because you can train foundation models specifically for your use case, and it just does the work for you, automates that for you end to end. So yeah, I see a lot of customers jumping on that bandwagon.
Yeah, I mean, we've been looking at kind of like internal tooling and just kind of making certain bits of your day more efficient. So me and a couple of the other guys wrote a way to write Jira tickets. So giving it the title and then generating Jira tickets. So, what would usually take a BA kind of 2 days to write for a new project? You've got all the headlines, you know what you kind of need to do, and then you press the button and it'll generate kind of a project's worth of tickets. Then you go in and you add your specific things to that project. But what GenAI is really good at is repeatable tasks that you'd spend a couple of hours doing. You can do it in a few minutes. So then you can spend your time doing the thing, actually building the stuff you need to build, rather than writing tickets or moving them around. We've also got kind of some more customer solutions. So we work primarily in healthcare and health tech, and kind of that's a huge field for it at the moment. It can do things like, this is from reading, not something we've done, but things like looking at the chemistry of prescription medicines and being able to identify new compounds. So being able to go, right, we know how all this works together, have you tried this? And then that kind of, again, gives you the lead generation to jump off and go, actually, we've not thought about that. And it can see things that you might not recognize as a person through pattern recognition.
I think, just to add, I think the sky really is the limit with GenAI. I think that there are use cases out there that you can read up on, but once you start using GenAI, and once you start using ChatGPT or any of these tools that we have out there, you can figure out, you can use it to make a bespoke tool out of it for your business. So that's one thing that it's just changing the world, because we've not had that before, where you can kind of build on something and nicheify it for your own business. So, yeah.
In fact, I remember reading, I think it was last week, about HubSpot building a tool called ChatSpot, which is in effect using GenAI to automate some of the HubSpot workflow. So being able to sort of reduce some of the mundane tasks and like sort of using the UI to configure HubSpot workflows. They've used GenAI plugins and tooling to in effect automate some of that process. So I think you're right, there really is kind of sky is the limit with these things.
Yeah.
I think with Codurance, with our work with our clients around software development, we've been exploring some of the software tooling around GenAI, so particularly around, most recently, things like GitHub Copilot, for example, and AWS Code Whisperer from AWS. I'm conscious of what do you both think around sort of the use case around using GenAI for software development and sort of code assistance?
I think as long as you take it with a pinch of salt. So I think there's, as with every new technology, there tends to be a bit of a scare and people saying, replacing jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So there's now obviously a big panic that, well, we don't need developers in 5 years' time because ChatGPT can do it. It's like, no, it can't. ChatGPT can do a lot of the groundwork, but what it can't do is troubleshoot. What it can't do is actually put the original thought into it. All it's doing is it's taking what's been done before and adapting it to do what you need to do. So actually what it can do for developers is speed up the process, remove all of the mundane tasks that they have to do day in, day out, all of the foundations. One of the use cases I kind of redid with it, we were doing some testing. We needed some test data. We couldn't use live data, obviously it's patient data. So we gave it the column names and the restraints, and it generated, endless amounts of test data. There you go, 4,000 records just to test on, which usually would literally be, okay, well let's think of 4,000 names and 4,000 dates of birth and 4,000 medical conditions and it just generated it all. And I think it took maybe we used the API for it rather than the ChatGPT web-based, and it was a few minutes to generate a few hours worth of content. So that kind of stuff is really quick, and we were able to use it. We managed to do something relatively cheeky, and got it to generate change logs from the word. You mentioned it a minute ago. GitHub. There we go. So you put in, it literally read the code and said, right, this is what's changed. Here's your change notes, because it knows it's also good at context based. So you say, write this as this. So write this as a set of release notes. It knows what release notes look like. It can write them. So yeah, just taking the input of the code and saying this is what's different in these two pieces of code, which was, again, a bit mind-blowing. It's that, I think we're at that stage of GenAI where you're like, oh well, no, this is just like magic. Yeah. It really is like technology looks like magic if you don't understand it. That's really where we are at the moment. Yeah. When ChatGPT is really, really mind-blowing when you do things like that.
I think it's very important to recognise that so people always are a bit worried that is it going to take our jobs? It's not. We are so unique. Humans are so unique. We have the thought, and we're the one that put it in there. So we're like, our thought, being able to come up with ideas is endless. I mean, I can sit down and speak to someone, they can have so many ideas in one conversation, and that's what we bring to the table. That's something that can never be taken away. So what ChatGPT does is to enable that to come to fruition and produces processes that allows that to happen. So yeah, don't worry about losing your job. But again, with Code Whisperer, which is natively a service, it doesn't just only generate code for you. You can literally tell it, generate a code for me that creates an S3 bucket and makes it public or whatever you need it to do, and it will write that for you in CDK. And that's great because it means that developers can use that time to speed up. First of all, they're speeding up innovation, and they're using the time to do other things, other more important things. So you are actually getting better use of your developers. And another thing it does is that it actually identifies errors in your code as well. But it's not always. I mean, you still need that human element to figure out, is that really an error? It might not be an error.
ChatGPT corrected me once, which was devastating. I wrote something in and said, actually, do you mean this? And I went, yeah, I do mean that, thank you. Great.
Yeah, so I mean, look at that. I mean, that's pretty cool. So what was I going with my point? I guess my point is that no, it doesn't take away our humanity. I think we are still needed. They need us. Not they need us, but it needs us. We need it, and it needs us to work together. So
I think that's quite a nice segue then to talk a little bit about some of the potential risks, maybe around the use of GenAI. There's a lot of discussion at the moment around GenAI, how do we use it, the risks, the issue, the security aspects, all those kinds of things. So I think you both mentioned the fact that you both feel that at the moment there's a need for kind of human oversight, even involvement in how we're using GenAI.
Yeah.
What do you see as some of the sort of potential risks at the moment with how we're using GenAI?
So if I can piggyback off my technology is magic comment, I think if you don't understand what's going on, you can't understand how to mitigate it. So if you don't know why it's doing something, then you can't rely on it. And I think that's ChatGPT particularly right now isn't very good at explaining why it's doing something. I mean, the actual model for ChatGPT, all it does is predict the next word that it's going to generate. It's not thinking. It's not thinking as a structure. It's going, right, okay, as a percentage, what is the most likely word to come next in this sentence when given this prompt. So it's not thinking as a whole, it's just kind of generating things. And people, because it looks so good and because it uses natural language and because it kind of communicates to us, it's very easy to just see it as right, because it's like, oh, wow, brilliant, it's understanding. Well, it's not understanding, it's using maths to generate the most likely next word, and it looks like it's doing something really impressive because it's speaking to us. And I mean, language is the pathway of intellect. You know, there's plenty of animals on this planet that are intelligent, but they can't speak, so we don't see it in the same way. So I think that's one of the big things right now, is that it looks really, really smart, but it's not yet. But that's not to say it's not going to be. I think when we were speaking previously, one of the things right now is that we are at the Wild West of AI, and especially of generative AI. You know, we are on the forefront now, and we do not know what the risks are. So we've got this kind of really cool language model, and we can generate all this really interesting content, but we don't quite understand what it's doing and how it's doing it. And I think that's the risk, not being able to explain why it's doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you don't want to, there's a thing called hallucinations, and you don't want, and that's where that's where your model is just saying things, so, and it makes it sound right, so, and giving you the wrong information. And if you were to take that and make a decision based on that, where that could be detrimental. So you want your AI model to be able to explain its thought process. How did it arrive to this decision? And I think we do that with humans. When we ask a question, we want someone to be able to explain that, so we can trust the process in which they've done that. And that's, like you said, that's something ChatGPT is not able to do properly at the moment. But I think where there is a whole conversation about responsible AI, and this is like building structures to ensure that your AI is following a set of principles such as security, privacy, fairness and ethics, governance, and all of these things, to ensure that whatever your output, whatever the AI the model is outputting, follows all these structures. And the onus is on the business to design how they're going to vet the output of their AI platform.
Yeah,
I think my sort of most favourite hallucination ChatGPT story is, I think it was a case in the US earlier in the year where there was a defence lawyer putting together a case for the judge, and he asked his assistant, go away and kind of do some research on cases that are similar, come back and build me kind of the report that I can put to the judge. So he did his work, came back, gave his boss a report of all the cases that were similar that would help the defence case. Brilliant, great. That then gets sent to the judge. Judge has a read through all these past cases that were similar. He goes, oh, there's a case here that I've never seen before in all my time as a judge. Where did you get this case from? It turns out the assistant to the lawyer has kind of Googled has searched on ChatGPT for similar cases, and it just simply kind of made up a case. Yeah. So there was a story of, in effect, the lawyer sort of being sued because he tried to use ChatGPT to find historical cases that were similar to suit his defence argument, and ChatGPT just made something up.
I think it's interesting, who do you hold accountable in that situation? Yeah. Who is it? The builders of the model, or is it ChatGPT? You're going to find ChatGPT and hold it and say you've just done that. So that's why we need a human element. It's really important that we don't negate that, because it's starting. I think there's a lot of conversation as to, we no longer need people. It's not that easy. It's not going to happen, I don't think.
Well, I think technology moves faster than governance as well. So we're at a stage where, governance and legislation is going to take a lot longer than technology takes to develop. So we're in a situation where we're going to have bad things happen, and then we'll react to it, not think about it as a whole, and just try and react to the things that are happening. And I don't think we're ever going to be at a point where we can lock it down in a way that's safe fast enough that the technology won't adapt beyond it. We've already got people breaking ChatGPT. There's a GPT kind of hack called Dan, just do anything now. And basically they say, the way they get around it is to basically tell it, right, you're role-playing a model that doesn't have those same rules as ChatGPT. And it goes around this big roundabout until eventually it will react and do things that are outside of the kind of constraints that ChatGPT has. And it's frankly terrifying, some of the reactions it has, and it does the same thing that every previous AI model goes really racist and sexist and horrible, which weirdly just always ends up the same way. But yeah, so it's already able to be broken.
Yeah.
And it's less than a year old is ChatGPT. There's always going to be someone tinkering with it. There's always going to be kind of innovation happening faster than we can lock it down.
Yeah. I think I was reading about explainability AI, and as much as we want our model to be able to explain itself, you don't want to. With bad actors, they can reverse engineer it.
Yeah.
Just like what you just explained, and we can have such situations just like this.
We don't actually know who built OpenAI. There's the people who own it, and we know the developers. We don't actually know who's responsible. At least at first, wasn't transparent where this model had come from, and it took off so quickly. It was a case of, have you heard of ChatGPT? And within 6 months, everyone had heard of it. Everyone was using it. We've got schools now having to have students do exams and coursework on paper because it's impossible to detect as a university and college, and that has a risk in itself.
Yeah.
And I think it's just it.
So for the audience, then, do you think are there things based on your experience that if they're adopting GenAI or GenAI tooling for the first time or new to it, are there things that they can be doing to mitigate some of these risks, do you think?
There is an article, sorry, my voice is going, with water. There was an article on AWS that was written, but it's on responsible AI, and it takes you. Has anyone here heard of well-architected reviews? Yes. So similar to well-architected reviews, where there's a list of questions, it evaluates your architecture, and it spits out what you should be doing or what you've done wrong and how you should, improve. It kind of follows the same structure and tells you how do you implement governance. What are do not put personal data onto. Just simple things like that. Yes, it may not. It's more of a remediation, more than a preventative measure. But these are this article takes you through things you should be thinking about and things you should put in place just before you start using GenAI in your business.
Yeah, and as an example of that, someone from a company that I know, someone got pulled up because they were using it to build software, and had basically put a load of customer data into OpenAI, and obviously that's a big no-no because you don't know where it goes, and then it becomes a whole GDPR nightmare. But yeah, I think the main thing is just have humans checking it. You can't just rely on it. You can't, even when we did things like generate Jira tickets, we weren't then just putting them into projects and just letting them happen. It's the case of, okay, you use OpenAI, ChatGPT to write the Jira tickets, and then you go through and you review them as you would do anything else. And it's just about having, being able to explain it, being able to review it properly and validate it. You can't have a non-developer, you can't write code with it and have a non-developer then go and check the code and just assume it's going to work. You have to have developers going through the code and make sure it actually works. Otherwise you end up just with broken code. And it's the same thing with, writing, using it for like legal cases or using it to write Jira tickets. It will produce what it thinks you want to see, or what is most likely to get it, trained into the next bit. So it's always going to look right, which is kind of the issue. It always looks somewhat right.
Yeah.
Quick show of hands, who's currently using or trialing any sort of Gen AI in the organisation? Just curious to see. Okay. So for those that aren't currently using it, how might they get started in the right way, do you think?
My approach is always just to kind of go on OpenAI, ChatGPT, and just tinker. Just ask it some questions. Think about just a task. Find a task you don't want to do and see if it'll do it. Was just how I started with it. I was writing. I was just writing some like commercial stuff, slide decks, and then just started like, I wonder if it could actually write this bit better than I can, and it did. Okay, start from there, and then just I wonder if it can generate user data for me. Yeah, it can. Cool. So just go and play with it and see what it can do. And then when you've got when you've got a use case, you can then develop that into something a bit more like robust. And the web-based ChatGPT is great, but when you get kind of hold of the APIs and you can start giving it custom inputs and using different language models, if you've got any data scientists in your organization, give it to them, because they'll find some absolute, they'll just find wizardry, which is what our data scientists did. Again, we had an idea, we took it to them, and they kind of produced something that was far and beyond what we'd even imagined. And I think it is just a case of just playing with it, just tinker.
Yeah, I agree. And just the other day, I created a website using Code Whisperer on AWS. I created a static website. It took me like 5 minutes to do that. So if you have an AWS account, just go on there, go on Code Whisperer, and it actually gives you prompts on what to do, how to create your first website or create your first, automation or whatever. So you can get your hands dirty, get yourself using it. And the thing about GenAI is you really don't need to know all the answers. It gives you the answers. You can ask it to do stuff for you. So I would say, definitely go on AWS and start using those.
There's also a number of services, I think, to get going with GenAI on AWS.
Yeah.
Amazon Bedrock you mentioned before, that's kind of a way of accessing foundational models.
Yeah.
There's also, I think, SageMaker and Jumpstart available.
Yeah. So you can build with SageMaker Jumpstart. SageMaker Jumpstart allows you to build your own models yourself. Whereas with Bedrock, Amazon Bedrock, it provides you with already built foundation models that you can access via API, and then you can fine tune them and for your specific use case. The difference between both, it's kind of imagine the idea of, okay, you want to incorporate GenAI into your business. One of the things you could do, I guess the harder thing to do, is having an EC2, putting lots and lots of data in there. EC2 is an instance of compute. Putting lots of data on there and actually building that yourself. You have to manage the security groups, you have to manage the privacy, you have to manage the connectivity and APIs and all that stuff. On the other side, as you move closer, you have SageMaker, Jumpstart, which is where you don't have to worry about managing all of these things. All you do is come on there and actually start building your models, putting your data on there, not worrying about security groups and anything like that. Then Bedrock, that's the serverless service that allows you to access these models and then just create your own thing. You don't have to worry at all. So it just makes it easier and easier. It's like a 3-step to incorporating GenAI into your business. I hope that kind of explains that properly, because I wanted to make sure that you could see how easy it could be to incorporate it in your business.
I guess if not, feel free to grab Victory afterwards to talk through some of the AWS services.
Absolutely, and I actually plan to maybe all the things I've mentioned today to put it on a LinkedIn post. So if you do follow me on LinkedIn, then it will all be there.
Perfect. I think lastly, and so before we wrap up, in terms of the adoption of GenAI in organisations, it's also like the technology itself, but do you think also there's a need to evolve some practices and process within organisations and teams to really benefit from GenAI?
I think it depends on what your business is and does. So some businesses will naturally kind of adapt it a bit easier. Things that are generally more R&D or bespoke development will probably be able to pick it up a lot easier. That's not to say that if your business isn't built that way, you can't just kind of build it into your functions. Like I said, with trying it, build it into like, I don't know. If you reviewing your processes and want to figure out a way to go faster, then see if you can utilize OpenAI or some other GenAI tools. If you're adapting new tooling, then kind of see if you can focus on some of the GenAI tools and see what's out there and see if anything just already solves a problem that you have. And if it doesn't, then see if you can solve the problem yourself and kind of. Yeah.
I agree. I think because right now everyone's talking about GenAI, you think I need to use it. A chatbot might be okay. Like just having an AI service is fine. You don't need to use GenAI if it's not needed. Because it does cost quite a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back to use cases a little bit, but like, it's not always the case if it has to do something that's kind of like a huge thing. I mean, we've used it at AirLogic to unify our FAQs. So it's things like, what's our holiday policy? being able to ask it a question in natural language
Yeah.
that now means that our HR team don't have to then answer the same kind of 30 questions a day. It's the case of, well, actually, now they get asked things they need to be asked. There's things like that. What's our expenses policy? Just really basic things.
Yeah, I agree. I've got my point now.
Should have
But
written
no,
it
I should write it down. But no, I agree. I think every business, in fact, as a person, if you think about it, as a person, there are many ways in which you can actually use Gen AI.
Mm-hmm.
So how that would obviously scale into your business, right? Because think about call centers. Gen AI can be used to kind of fast track past the same questions that you get every day. It can just answer those questions and get you right to the person you need. If you have to write content for your website, that too can be used. So I think every business at some part of their function, might require Gen AI, and that's what you should probably start thinking about. How will that, what is the cost here? If I implement Gen AI, will that save me a lot of time and allow my staff to do better things? And if so, then how do I get started? And there are many, many ways in which you can.
Brilliant. Thank you both.
Yeah.
I think we'll now move into the second panel.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, so thank you, Matt, Victory, and Lewis. So, look, we've had some really good questions. Keep them coming. So I'll give you guys a little bit of time to prepare. So we'll shift focus in a minute. But there's been quite a lot of questions from the audience around legal ramifications, some of the risks inherent in using ChatGPT for organisations. So maybe just have a little think about that. We'll come back to questions shortly. But yeah, we're just going to shift focus slightly now. I appreciate there's quite a lot of overlap here, but more of a conversation now around business automation and service delivery. So I'll hand over to Catherine from Tech UK and we'll kick off.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, so welcome to the second half of this discussion today. My name is Catherine Holden. I lead our work on a few technologies at Tech UK, data analytics, digital identity and AI. For those of you that haven't heard of Tech UK, we are the largest technology trade association here in the UK, based in London, but have sort of regional presence across the whole of the UK, members across the entirety of the UK and also operating abroad as well. So yes, delighted to kick off the second session. As we said, keep the questions coming. Just submitting your questions through Slido and the QR code. But I'd like to now introduce my panel. So Matt, I think we'll be bringing you into a couple of the questions here as well. But in order here, I've got first of all Richard Irvine. Richard is the Chief Data Officer for NHS West Yorkshire ICB and Leeds City Council. Having moved from NHS Digital in 2022. At NHS Digital, Richard held responsibility for all national data collection activity. During the pandemic, Richard led the data operations for the NHS shielded patient list and a COVID-19 vaccination programme. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for joining us. And I've also got with us Saily Villegas, who is the tech entrepreneur and co-founder for CAI. CAI is an AI-focused software development company based here in Leeds. And Saily has recently been recognised as one of the Women in Innovation Award winners by Innovate UK. As I said, she founded CAI during her master's degree at the University of Leeds, and now the company has won multiple awards, including Rising Stars in Tech Nation and Northern Star Tech Awards. Lots of accolades there, so well done. So I'd like to maybe sort of start the conversation in a similar place to where Matt began his around defining generative AI. I mean, in my world, there's so many definitions in this space. There are lots of people talking, often at cross purposes. Sometimes it's generative AI, sometimes it's foundation models, frontier models. Saily, can you help sort of explain this for us? How do you go about defining some of these key areas?
I think everybody has their own definition, but as Victory said, it's a subset of artificial intelligence that focuses on generating content, and this content can come in different forms. Could be images, could be audio, could be video, and another interesting one, and one that I'm very passionate about, is the generation of text, and which is another subset of this generative AI models, and they're called large language models, and they focus on creating text. And if you have not heard the term of large language models, I'm sure you're familiar with it anyway, because it's the technology that's behind ChatGPT. So I'm pretty much sure that everybody in this room has used them. And the reason why I found them so interesting is because they're so versatile. They can be applied for so many tasks. I'm sure you've used them from writing a draft for an email that you didn't want to send, or creating content for a blog post that you didn't have time to write. So there could be so many different uses and applications. So everybody has their own definition, and they can go as deeply or as shallow as you want. But basically, in my words, is generating outputs. And these outputs have made from patterns that they have found in their training data.
Really clear. Thank you, Celie. Richard, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that sort of explanation. And within I guess within Leeds City Council and the NHS in Leeds, we're quite familiar with use of AI for predictive analysis and machine learning and so forth. Where we're trying to get to is to understand how we can best apply generative AI to produce content, and I'm sure the discussion will get on to some of the key challenges as a almost an organisation that's surfacing information to the public, and to present that in a form that sort of holds on to the ethical challenges and the governance challenges that come with it. So very much about producing content.
Thank you, and I'd love to come into some of those real-life case studies in a bit. Matt, I just wanted to come to you just quickly on this. I'm definitely seeing there's a conversation when it comes to generative AI. There's almost two camps that exist at the moment, those focusing on open models and those focusing on closed models. Both have different opportunities and risks associated with them. Are you able to sort of unpack that in a bit more detail for us?
Yeah, sure. So I think we mentioned earlier on that this idea of understanding what's going on under the hood, like being able to explain models. So I think even earlier this year, Meta announced that their latest Llama 2 model will be open source. I think Nick Clegg said that part of the thinking behind that was that he wanted to make it a little bit more explainable to understand why we're doing that. So I think there's kind of open and closed models. The closed model, you don't really understand how the data is being used, how it's being trained, how it's arriving at certain outputs. I think the intention at least with the open source and opening of models is that we can crowdsource some of the thinking behind the models and how they're created, and hopefully get to a place where they are a little bit more explainable. So I think that's some of the drive behind Meta's decision to open source Llama 2, I think, later this year.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Matt. And now let's come on to some of those real-life, tangible use cases. As we've already sort of discussed, this is, generative AI as a technology still incredibly nascent. We are starting to see pockets of activity. Can you maybe tell me, Celia, a bit about from your perspective, where are you seeing some really exciting use cases that are happening right now?
I think, first of all, I'd like to start by saying that what has changed recently, has surprised me, is that sectors or areas that were not thought or considered to be techie are the ones that are very interesting now. So the fact that these models or ChatGPT was open for everybody to use has made people that thought, oh no, that's not for me, to be really interested. So if we had a lot of interest in insurance as well, insurance companies wanting to do something with their data, traders wanting to do something with their data, construction. So those things, those areas, we have started working with them to unlock value from their structured data, and that means that they had a lot of data that they couldn't tap into, a lot of information, and the reason for this was because they couldn't structure it. So we have been working on some data linkage. Another one that maybe people might relate to is for recruiters. So when you write your CV, you can become really creative and writing in different formats, and this is really hard for one person to look at all the CVs. So what they do is they use computers to do it. But having this unstructured format make it really hard to process, and that means a good candidate might be missing a good role. So we have created, using large language models, we have created a way to standardize this format and this data in a format that can be then processed and read by computers, so that these candidates are not missed out. We have also utilized large language models to empower web scraping, in which this used to be hard with traditional code because you had to write more custom code to scraping these websites, and then if the website changed, you needed to rewrite it, and this used to be really time consuming. So we have started automated these processes. We have used it. So these are very different sectors. We are using recruiting, we're using web scraping for construction, for traders, and we're using content creation for some areas in academia as well to kind of like generate reports of some research that has been done. So they're completely different areas, but everybody is now interested in to see how they can utilize it to automate bits that they could find boring or they had found that they couldn't do them before.
Fascinating, thank you, Sadie. And I wonder, Richard, if you could come in. Obviously, when it comes to health and social care, that is obviously a huge opportunity when it comes to generative AI. If we can get it right and do it in an ethical and responsible way. What are your thoughts on where are you seeing use cases, emerging right now, maybe within the NHS, but also what's the potential in the future as well for where this can go?
Thanks. The potential is huge. I think where we are. Bear in mind, the NHS is all about people. It's all about delivering care. And a lot of the use cases that spring to mind are ones where you're providing a response to someone about their journey through the health system, or if it's within the council, it's about responding to, could be a challenge, a question, a complaint. And we've played around with chatbots and other technologies previously. I think where we are now is we're trying to form those real tangible and use cases that actually feel safe, and that's the space we're playing in now. What was utterly brilliant in the first panel is some of the use cases, whether it's Jira tickets or whether it's spinning up a cluster. I love that. These are really tangible things that actually you could see yourself doing, and what I love about some of the AI capability, the generative AI capability, is it really accessible. So I would regard myself as relatively technical, but I haven't touched code for 2 or 3 years, and actually I found it straightforward to get hold of Azure AI and start playing around with that yesterday evening, and that was fascinating. And I know there are other products, of course, but it actually brings it to I guess normal people that you can start to, it's tactile. You can do something with it. And it feels like you can explore and invent, and it's quite intuitive. I think where we are as a public sector organisation is trying to bring everyone with us. So it can't just be about 2 or 3 people finding use cases that actually, if you go out to a delivery team, that they feel that's a bit odd and a bit distant from them. So there's something about how do you land something with a customer facing or patient facing team that they can have high trust in, that they can think actually this will generate efficiency savings without being quite ethically challenging, without thinking about how it might impact on an individual, sometimes detrimentally. And within the NHS, we love a good methodology, so we need to know how things work. If you can pick something up and read it, and it says here are the business rules and here is the logic that goes into determining a pathway or a decision or whatever, that's what we want to see. And generative AI doesn't, at the moment we're grappling with that. There's a fear of the unknown. There's a sense of what happens if we make a decision or we push something out there and it's wrong, and chances are that would be there's limited risk, but there is a risk, and it's better if a person takes that risk because you can stand by that and you can call it professional judgment, than if you said, well, I just allowed the computer to determine a decision. So it's really challenging, but there are loads of brilliant use cases. Some of them are just at this point we're not mature enough to sort of step forward yet.
And as you said, the environment that you're operating in is high risk, it's high stakes. If you get something wrong in the healthcare sector, that could be the difference between life and death. So it's probably right to take a cautious approach and sort of really consider how this technology is used effectively within your sector.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. Brilliant. Maybe Celia, if I could come on to you now, I'd love to just dive into a bit more detail on some of the potential around this technology, both what you're seeing now but in the future. And we've touched on it a little bit about the impact this could have on staff and employees, but how do we use this technology in a way that also enables sort of staff empowerment?
I think I'm fascinated by this technology, and I do see them as magic. And I do believe that they have the potential to do everything, because they don't just create contents, but we've seen models where they can create code and they can create tools, and they can learn how to use these tools and reuse them, and it's just impressive what they can do. But we don't know, even though they have the potential to do everything, we don't know for sure that they're going to do everything. And I still believe that these technologies won't take over. So going back to the potential that has to empower people, I think there's a lot of potential already being seen to empower people, but the real heavy duty cases are still yet to be developed. So we're still discovering, we're still in this era of finding out what they can do. But at the moment, they could be really good at automating those manual, boring tasks. And there's two types of people: the people that are really up for implementing the technologies, those who utilizing them, they have been utilizing them from day one, and those who reject them. Those who reject them, I believe that it's because the fear of their unknown, or because they feel that they're going to be replaced, or they feel like they could still do things better than ChatGPT could. And for these people, I think it's important to show them how we can automate those mundane tasks, or how we can relate to them to automate their jobs. For example, Victory gave an example of a call center. I'm sure if you work at a call center and you're answering the same question 5 out of the 8 hours you work a day, you don't want to do that. And you want to maybe utilize your talent to do more high value work that where it requires this empathy, where it requires like high solving problem skills. And if you show that you can automate this, maybe you can get these people excited about utilizing this technology so that they make better use of their time, so that they feel empowered. So as developers, it doesn't write all the code for them, but if it writes 80% of a function, and then you use all your knowledge or your skills to optimize that function, or to write it the way that you can do it, well, you're going to feel like you're much more productive. You're going to feel like happier. It's not like you're going to be out of a job. So this is the potential that it can have to empower people. And I feel like I'm starting to divert a little. Did you ask any other question?
No, that was perfect. That was really clear. Richard, did you want to come in and talk?
Yeah, just I guess it's a double-edged sword. I guess the challenges in the question there. It's wonderful. You know, the potential to be able to automate the mundane, produce content where you've got a person doing that day in, day out, and it's that sort of routine activity. You flip that on its head, and you're dealing with people, and you're dealing with change, and quite often you're dealing with individuals who, you know, filling in that spreadsheet in on a morning, or writing, I don't know, a response that's the same thing every day. That's almost their comfort blanket, isn't it? And we're grappling with some of that. It feels odd to say. I know we should just say get on with it, and that's progress. But it's quite difficult, isn't it? We're dealing with people who take pride in their activity, and on the one hand, they may have a level of distrust with allowing an automated process to or something that's locked away where they don't understand to create content. On the flip side of that is that might be someone's job. That might be the thing that they quite enjoy doing, and they quite like going to the canteen and having a moan about it. Do we have canteens anymore? Probably not. But I guess there's the human that you need to bring into this, and whenever you're thinking about sort of these candidates to replace with generative AI or some form of automated solution, there's almost that resistance there that you need to work through. So there's a little bit around transformation, people change, organisational maturity that probably we need to go through, and that I think that's much harder than, I don't know, playing around with AI sometimes. Generative AI and some of the solutions just make it so easy and so exciting that there you go.
I think on that front, it's quite similar to what we see quite a lot with cloud migration. So we have lots of clients migrate their software to the cloud. There's quite a strong parallel that I see there with the nervousness around giving up data hosting and software hosting to a cloud provider. But I think you both mentioned it before, like the potential of kind of once you're in the cloud then is vast. So I think there's a similar kind of parallel, I think, a nervousness around, oh, should I really be hosting my software in the cloud? Can I really afford to have my data hosted on the cloud?
And that's a real live conversation within the NHS and within Leeds Digital Council that we're still having this debate. I'm sure, Victor, you'll tell me that AWS and or cloud hosting has been there for about 25 million years now, but that we're still at that stage of we lack maturity, we lack the scalability and elasticity and all those things that go with it. So yeah, we still have those challenges around getting rudimentary digital capability out of the box without looking at the sort of next step.
And then I just want to say, there's another point in which, like, once people are afraid of using it, start using it, and then they realize how great it is, then you need to be worried about them using it for everything and not wanting to do any work and not writing any other email and not writing any other bit of code. So it's about just a balance, and they need to understand, again, how it works, why things are being produced and where they're being produced, and then they can still be mistakes, and this is where the human input is really necessary, and that it won't automate all the tasks. It's really important to understand that this is not a silver bullet. It's not going to work for everything, and using it for everything is costly. As Victoria said, using it for everything, using it as a magic hammer for every problem, every feature that you want to solve, yes, it could work, but it could be slow or it could be very expensive. So it's about the choosing when, why, and how to utilize it within your organization.
Thank you, Sadie. I'd like to now come on to, which we've already started to come on to anyway, naturally in this conversation, some of the risks. And now this is an area that we know particularly UK government's focusing on tremendously this year. We say that this is the year of probably the start of AI regulation in this space. So earlier this year in March, the UK government produced an AI white paper, which is basically highlighting the rules of the road in terms of how AI will be regulated in the future. And it's very much a sort of a principle-based type approach, recognising this technology is evolving at pace. And to some of the points made earlier, actually trying to keep on top of this as the technology is evolving and regulating appropriately is quite a tall order. We also know there's tremendous amount of interest in this directly from Number 10. So in November, on the 1st and 2nd, Rishi Sunak and others are running their AI Safety Summit, which is the first global AI summit of its type, looking at focusing on frontier AI and the safety implications of that. So this is a really live discussion that's happening both here in the UK, but bringing together global leaders to try and identify how do we, first of all, identify the risks, but also then go on to address them effectively, on an international scale. This isn't an easy kind of area to sort of tackle, but I would love to get the panel's thoughts, maybe Celie, starting with you. What are you seeing as some of the kind of the most prevalent or high risk areas that need addressing in this area, and what does that look like from your perspective? How are you going about tackling some of those? Big question, I know. So.
It's a big question, but I think in general you need to be aware that these models make mistakes. Knowing that there's statistical models of text, or that they can predict the next word, or that what they can hallucinate, they can get things wrong, is really important here. And also you need to manage those expectations. The problem with just jumping on the train really quickly without, just because everybody's doing it, is you expect a lot of this model, especially if you've never worked or been around AI. You expect them to do everything for you and do it right and read your mind and then just do everything. And the reality is that's not what they do. And when this happens, people get disappointed, and either they don't want to use them, or when they're not aware of the risks that happen, things can go wrong in their organization. So managing expectations is really important. You need to be aware of these risks and learn how to manage them, and maybe accept and be okay with them. But accepting them, that doesn't mean that you're going to provide a wrong service, but having things in place, like such as services in place, a person verifying of the outputs, as it was mentioned in the first panel. You need to have a human that's verifying that information that you're going to put out there in the world. The same way you're going to write, if you get it to automate an email to write it for you, you're not just going to send it blindly. You're going to see what it wrote and maybe change a few words, and maybe if you check if it sounds too robotic, you're going to modify it a little bit so it doesn't write best regards, but it writes best wishes. So it's about all these things. You need to manage expectations and be okay with the level of risk while there's still rules in place. And this is really important so that we don't go into an AI winter again in which people think that AI is failing us and AI is wrong, so that we can implement it properly in our organizations before these rules are enforced.
Thank you, Sadie. Now, Richard, we've spoken about the importance of the human in the loop, some of the challenges around sort of business transformation and kind of that cultural piece. What are the other sort of and hallucinations earlier as well? What are the sort of other sort of significant challenges that you're thinking about in this space, and how we get that right?
I think, there's a couple that spring to mind. I mean, first of all, there's the ethics in that. So how does it feel to a member of the public or a citizen to know that a clinician or a consultant or could be anyone who hasn't reviewed their care? It's been, a part of their care has been carried out independently. So I absolutely take the point that there's something about assurance. I mean, you wouldn't make a decision, a determination on a pathology image by compute power alone. You'd have a clinician or a consultant reviewing the potential for AI or automation will allow you to cut to the chase and to almost work through a huge backlog and then just give you a sample to review. So you can see the benefit, but so there's something about ethics in there. I think it's important to note. I think you make a really good point about errors might be created, but of course a human might make an error. So I think there's a level of trust that we need to build, and we need to build that capability. And we may find that generative AI is a way of reducing down the number of errors, but we're not at that stage yet. Right now, it's seen as the unknown. And I guess the other consideration is that that we're not clear what an AI solution might do. It's not tangible. It's not written down, or at least we can't get hold of that. To the point where within our organisation, so the NHS in Leeds and also Leeds Digital Council, we've made a determination, and we're working with the Information Commissioner's Office, and we just said, look, we're not going to process person level citizen data at this point in time. We're going to allow, we're running a sort of piece of work with Microsoft around Copilot, and we're sort of stress testing it, and that's been our determination, and we're sort of keeping to that advice that we just will not take any citizen data anywhere near, and I think that's our safeguard at the moment. And the final thing to remember is that any automated or any coded process, for example, relies on the underlying data. And what we might find is, if you inadvertently push out, I know there's a story in the paper this morning around letters, and but it's not in Leeds. So if you were running a coded process to produce content right now, one of the challenges would be the quality of the underlying data, and it doesn't really matter whether it's generative AI or just a normal automated process. If your data's not robust, then and you've not got strong governance in place, then you're going to persist with errors and anomalies. Well, that's going to be there regardless of what technology we're using, and it will be easy at this point to flip over to using some form of generative AI and to blame the solution and not the underlying data governance practice. So there's a few things. I mean, by far the biggest risk to us is that of reputation and ethics, and doing the wrong thing and allowing a process to inadvertently cause error and distress.
Thank you, Richard. this is just kind of triggering another question, which I know we haven't necessarily prepared, but as I said, there's such tremendous interest from kind of a political perspective in this area. Be keen to get the panel's thoughts, don't mind who, on how do we progress ethical and responsible adoption of generative AI? What needs to happen? What's the call to government in this space? What should we be asking for when these AI summit, safety summit discussions are happening? What's the call from industry and the NHS?
I think one of the big things that was mentioned earlier, I think it was both panels, is being able to build that explainability into the models to understand, okay, that's the output from the model, but actually how did it get to that output? What were the decisions it took? What was the data it used? I think that's missing right now. We can't see into that process.
Mm-hmm.
That for me would be a big one. I think there's also a trade-off, right, between governance and innovation. So too much governance stifles innovation, and we don't want that. But I think there's also a need for a certain level of governance to make sure. I think it's the same with the internet, right? The internet came along very, very rapidly, and we're only really now starting to kind of bake in some governance of how we're using the internet and social media. I think the same is true with AI.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that across our members as well. You know, they're not necessarily afraid of regulation and governance. Actually, that can help set the rules of the road and the parameters in which you can adopt and deploy this technology, and actually provides them with that business confidence they need to invest. So I think that's very, very important.
Can I just quickly add as well? I think it's really important to define what is ethical. Like, we're already having conversations. We're already not in unification about what ethics is. Some people think this is what being ethical is, and some people don't.
Yeah.
I think that needs to start first. We need to define what makes something more ethical or not, and then we also need to think about biases as well. Mm-hmm. So everything, there's a bias. I always feel like I know, and we all know that there's a bias. Things aren't always just the way it is. There's usually it's coming from somewhere, and if your model is built with bias, it's gonna produce an output that is biased. So how are we gonna ensure that the training data that we use is not biased? And that's hard because we're all individuals with thoughts and our own, the way we see life, the way we see things. So I guess there is an answer. I'm not really giving an answer here, but I just think there's a lot to think about when it comes to this conversation that's coming up in the future with, is it Rishi soon?
Yeah.
I think just to add to kind of Matt's and Victory's point, really, we're talking about being able to explain how it came to a decision, but we also need to see what training data it's used and how it's been trained. So explainability doesn't just happen in the case of this is how it got to this answer. It's saying, well, this is the data we used to train it. Yeah. I think that's a big thing right now, is we don't actually know what data has been used to train things like ChatGPT, where the data's come from, how it's been sourced. You know, for all we know, it's decade of Facebook data, which might well be. We don't know where it's come from, and I think it's some questions about kind of stolen data as well. We need to know, as well as explaining what the process of decision was, how it was trained to come to that decision.
Yeah, I think there was something I was reading of in America where, somewhere in America where in the healthcare system it was using GenAI or something of that sort, and it was trying to figure out if someone had like a skin issue, but it would be able to spot it in a lighter skinned person, and when it came to someone who was darker, it wouldn't be able to compute, or it would just say something random. And that is detrimental. Like, that can cause a huge problem. Mm-hmm. So I think having a robust data is also important. And how do you vet that? How do you know this is enough? This is the right amount of varied data that I need, or not? So, yeah.
Lots to unpack there. We almost need longer to delve into some of that. Any thoughts or reflections on that kind of call to government there, or where are the areas where you like to see kind of greater?
I think more than the areas, I think I would like to see them being more open to feedback from people that actually, or organizations that are actually using these technologies, and not wait years until they change something, because they're going to be willing to move really quickly. Technology is evolving really quickly. These uses are changing every day. There's so much out there, and then the next day you wake up and there's so much more. So they need to get up to date, up to speed with what's happening, and be willing to address these changes very, very quickly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think just two things from me. First of all, look, within Leeds, I would say this, wouldn't I? I think we're really progressive. I think we embrace, and I'm talking about not Leeds as a city, because we're brilliant as a city, but in terms of our public sector, local government, NHS organisations, we're really on the forefront. We're doing some really fantastic things, and actually we take pride that we innovate and we use technology in the way that I think we should be going, and we have that leadership support to do that. And I think that's really good. But when we look across the landscape of all local authorities or all NHS organisations across the country, we're outliers, and there are one or two who are taking baby steps. Same as us, actually. You know, we're not forging miles ahead, but we're looking across for those candidate use cases, and it's quite hard. I know you're within sort of wider industry, you'll be awash with brilliant examples, but in, you know, when you're looking at a person journey through a system, we're really struggling to find almost those neighbourhood local authorities or NHS organisations that are really happy to share thoughts and ideas. So I think so there's something about having like-minded partners who we can go to say, we've got a really good idea, has anyone else tried something like this? We think this is a really good way of delivering efficiencies. So on the one hand, we're struggling to find those partners, and that's a sort of call out to anyone who can make suggestions. I'm very happy to receive them. And the other thing is, and we've mentioned before, is about visibility. So the single thing that will hold us back is visibility of how any form of GenAI or model works. And we've heard today about the bias and the ability to bring good training data or good sort of training model together, and that's really important. As I say, when in the NHS we love a good methodology. We want to know how a process works, and sometimes it could be the most complicated algorithm that runs behind a process, and it's almost like that assurance. So the moment we publish it, no one might understand it, but the fact that we published it becomes a bit more transparent. And I think we struggle with that with some of the AI capability, because it's not tangible, it's not tactile. So I think a little bit of visibility, but then would go a long way. Certainly that's the lobbying that I would want to do centrally.
Brilliant. Some very clear calls to actions there, I think. Rishi Sunak, if you're listening, so thank you. We have time for just maybe one final question, if that's all right, before we then get onto the audience questions. So if you haven't had time, I'm sure we're already inundated, but do remember to just scan the QR code, ask your questions in the next few minutes. So the final question, we've already seen that in the room here, we've got a couple of people sort of dabbling in this area, trying to work out what generative AI could do for them and their organisations. You know, as two people who've been thinking about this sort of a lot recently, what's your kind of one key takeaway for those in the room that are looking at or trying to work out where to begin and how to prepare? Celine.
I think someone mentioned it, but you need to start tinkering with it. You need to take some time or some resources in your organization or for yourself and start building. The only way to learn how everything works and for everybody to understand what the best use cases are is building. So by start building now, that everybody's building right now, like the world is like a global hackathon. Everybody's trying to understand the best way to implement it, the right way to implement it, the wrong way, the risks. So the only way is for everybody to try and try to discover new use cases. And this way, if within organizations, if leaders start building or implementing these things in place where it's a safe environment to build, to make mistakes, then you can come up with some sort of strategies, long-term plans, training guidelines that are really important so that everybody learns how to use them, how not to use them, and for what purposes.
Thank you, Celine. And finally, Richard.
Yeah, I'd agree. Look, it's so accessible and it's out there, and a little bit of tinkering goes a long way. And certainly within the public sector, it's quite a there's almost a risk there, isn't there? It's quite brave to say, actually put down your day job where there's financial challenges, there's not enough capacity to do the job in hand, and give up time to be a little bit more transformative. But what I found, and a handful of colleagues, we find it's quite tactile. It's quite straightforward to do quite basic things, and we'll grow that space. But to have that spread more widely across our organisation would be phenomenal. And we're trying to encourage that discovery and that curiosity.
Excellent, thank you. Right, well, that draws us to the end of the second panel. I'd like to now hand over to Simon for a few audience questions.
Yep, brilliant, thank you. We've had a lot of questions, so I'll just try and capture a cross-section of those. At least one person's been using the Slido GenAI feature, which I feel like my role's become obsolete in the last hour or so, which is a bit disconcerting for me, but it's a bit meta, that, for my little brain. So, I think all the panel have touched on this, but it's come up with a few different questions, so it feels like it's just worth circling back round. There's a lot of interest in this. So, what's the danger in organisations using unknown and potentially unknowable models to train on their own data, which maybe is confidential, is private, there's GDPR protected implications? So, what's the danger in organisations using some of those models to train on their own data?
Yeah. Who wants to have a go? Victory first?
I'm happy to have a go. So, where do I start? Mm-hmm. I think that there is a danger in that, but what organisations like AWS, I know I keep talking about AWS, but I work there, so that we do is, for example, with Bedrock, you have access to foundation models, but of course you want to fine tune that for your own use case. And so what happens is that the data in which you use to fine tune your model is going to be essentially sitting with you. So that data, so it kind of, imagine that it imports the foundation model onto your own infrastructure. And then when you're training that data, it is not going to fine-tuning that data, it's sitting with you. So you have complete ownership of, the data you put in there, and you're absolutely sure that it is not being used to train the actual foundation model that is open for everyone. So that's one of the ways in which organizations can mitigate that. That's all I have, actually. That's the only way.
So if I can just add, it is dangerous if you just put all your personal data, your client's data, maybe in ChatGPT on the chat, and you try to do something with it. But there are ways such as AWS or Azure and AWS that you can isolate this and prevent this from happening.
Yeah, I think just kind of understanding, the basic understanding of what's going on will prevent you from doing stupid things as well. You've got to make sure that people in the company or people wherever are aware that, listen, this isn't isolated. We're not putting something into something we control, and so you can't put things in there that you don't want sharing. ChatGPT, for example, it's only one of many, but we kind of know that they might not use the data you put in to train the model. We don't know that, so just don't put anything in there you don't want sharing. Don't start putting confidential information. Don't start putting patient and customer data in there. Don't put anything in that you wouldn't want to be sent somewhere else.
Yeah.
I think also part of the risk. I think also part of the risk is how you're plugging in GenAI to your overall organisational kind of ways of working and practices. So if you're automating a critical part of your business through GenAI, and we know there's these inherent flaws, so hallucinations and all those other things, then there's an inherent risk to your business by the very fact of that nature. So I think there's the risk of, yes, these things exist in GenAI tooling and the models, but I think there's almost some guidance in terms of how we're using it and how we're plugging it into our own organisation. So I think you mentioned earlier, Richard, about kind of how you're using it with your organisation. It's not critical things within the organisation yet. You're sort of starting to kind of, I guess, dabble with it a little bit. I think that lowers the risk then, I think, as part of that, because the impact is kind of contained.
As an extra thing, don't use it to do things that you don't understand. So if you're not a developer, don't try and use its right code, because you're not going to be able to fact check it. We have to make sure it's actually saying the right thing. If you're a legal assistant, don't try and use it to find existing legal cases, because if you can't fact check it, then you're not going to know. So I think that's one of like the key takeaways as well, is you have to check it. It's not, you can't just trust it. You have to, well, that's it, just don't trust it. Treat it like anything else, don't trust it.
Yeah, I think Lewis has said it. So we put in guardrails, and we're taking. I think we're taking baby steps. The creative amongst you would think we're I don't know, a bit slow to adopt, but I think that incremental, that cautious. That cautious rollout with assurance and with eyes on it at every step, that's going to help us to make a difference. And there's something about building confidence. You know, we're in a people-focused organisation, and we need to. Without that, we'll just lose. We'll have reputational risk, and we'll lose the confidence of the public. So baby steps, incremental progress, but also with those guardrails. And we're building in guardrails all the time. We're finding out new things to be cautious about, but also we're breaking down some of the barriers too as we get used to it, as we discover.
Absolutely. Just one very small thing I just wanted to add was on the point around sort of employee guidance. I think we definitely need to be making sure we're ensuring our staff know how to, but also how not to use this technology. I would recommend on gov.uk, there's been recently some guidance that's been produced helping civil servants navigate this area and what they should be doing around this technology. I know a number of companies that have taken that as a bit of a blueprint and used that to then kind of create a version of that guidance for their own organisations. So just a useful tool to signpost to.
I was just I've got something to say, but it's more of a question. I wonder if we might get to a place where we'll have to ask people in our our staff to not put certain prompts. So we might have our own foundation model, and we have our own GenAI platform, and we say, okay, well, we do not put these prompts on here because we don't have guardrails for that. I wonder if we'll get there, because we can try and govern what the outputs can be, but we just don't know, because GenAI is generative. It's always generating something new. So perhaps what we could do is, okay, right, you can say these kinds of things, but maybe when it comes to, I don't know, something else, do not ask it this, because I don't know how I'm going to be able to remediate that if there's a problem.
I think what makes that worse is that it's getting increasingly hard to differentiate between human authored content and GenAI authored content. So I think that makes that probably even worse.
Yeah.
I'm worried at this point that we'll add to our mandatory training. So alongside fire awareness and lifting heavy objects, we'll have use of generative AI.
Generally, if you ever see an email from me that's really well written with no mistakes in, I was ChatGPT to write it.
Yeah, have you read my reply?
Great, okay, look, thanks. You've actually covered off quite a few questions there, which is great. So, just on a different type, but it's something that you all touched on, I think, to some degree. So, question is, if an AI system hallucinates, where does liability sit if there are fiscal or worse consequences? And in a similar vein, how do you credit copyright input data? Yeah, that question around liability.
I mean, I'll start with the proviso. I'm not a lawyer. Do not take this as legal advice. But the liability is with the company and the person. As with every tool, you can't say, "Oh well, I didn't know that Jira would do this." Ultimately, it's down to the people using the tool to take liability. Now, whether or not a lawyer would agree with me, I don't know. But from what I know and from my experience, ultimately, you can't blame a tool for doing something and then not take responsibility for it.
Yeah,
I think. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think ignorance is not an excuse, and regulators don't care for your ignorance. In fact, that's the basis in which they're gonna prosecute you. So you should always, it always stands with you. So you have to take accountability of whatever you're producing from GenAI. You should always vet, even if you're not sure. You should always ask somebody who has more expertise in that field.
Why shouldn't Amazon take responsibility if they generate top input?
Sorry, say that again?
Why shouldn't Amazon be the one taking the responsibility if they're generating it through their product, through my input?
So, like I said, it's just like ChatGPT. If a foundation model is similar to a large LLM, an LLM, it's just that it's a smaller scale. So its job is to it has vast amount of data, and it's built a structure on how to answer questions or how to generate things, generate new content, right? That's his job. Now, what you put in there is what's going to make it, is what's going to bring out the output that you're looking for. So it's just a tool.
But if I don't create the output, why should it be my responsibility?
Because you're choosing how to use the output.
Well, it depends how you use it.
Sorry, it feels a bit combative, but it's not.
No, this is good.
Based on the fact that in an American case at the moment, they said that there is no copyright for anything generated by the AI. So it's then when you reuse it, you claim the copyright. Obviously, you'll definitely call things like years, but it's going to be a really fundamental debate to the future of AI, because someone somewhere like says that they get prosecuted or sued or die or something. And there was another case in America where they used it to ask about whether an autistic boy, his medical insurance covered by his future needs, and ChatGPT basically wrote a response that was pretty much the same as like the best way the country that was cardboard the boss. So it's quite interesting, and then
I think it's good you're asking these questions.
It's a bit of a straw man, but like, are Ford Motors responsible if you hit someone with your car? You know, ultimately you're using the tool. You're driving, you know, a 4-ton metal box, and if you hit someone with it, then it's down to you. You know,
it is though, because it's until and unless Ford develop an intelligent driving model, then it becomes joint responsibility, doesn't it? In the same way that when we sign up with AWS, we accept a joint responsibility for data protection. Mm-hmm. Does that not apply to AI as well?
It does, and there is a shared responsibility. It is. With AI, the shared responsibility is that you are putting something on there. Whatever comes out is your responsibility to vet, to ensure that this aligns with what you want or what you're looking for. The job of the tool is to provide, to ensure that you can create something, generate something. It's not God. It's not saying to you, I'm going to solve all of your problems and also mitigate anything that comes out of it. You have the choice to use that tool.
Just don't trust it.
So maybe I'll come out with a slightly different response, which is, and I'm not a lawyer and would never profess to be, but if you apply the public interest test, so who is accountable, or who, you know, not who is legally responsible, but if we, for example, as an organisation, the NHS, so in Leeds, we pushed out content to individuals that was erroneous, that was wrong. I think the public interest would be focused on us rather than the capability that we use. Now, that it could be that we might choose to deflect and say we're using a capability that we were unsure of, but I still think that the public would see us as being accountable for that. And that's a different answer, and it doesn't answer your question, but it hopefully adds an explanation as to why we need to put in place safeguards and guardrails.
Definitely, and thank you for your input, because it's none of us know what we're doing.
I think there's something around the difference between the algorithm that sits in these models and then how we're using the output. So I think that's the crux of it for me.
Victory said something that is something I've sort of been saying. Once you use an LLM and you use it, it's an SLM, isn't it? Like, it's my small language model type thing, and that's quite a nice way to think about it. So
I think
that helps translate it to like idiots like me.
I think to use Richard's example there, I think the crux of that would be there's a human decision to take that output and kind of pass that on to others. So I think that would be, for me, where the sort of the responsibility or the blame, if you like, would lie.
It goes back to what we've kind of said across the day, is that you need to check it. You know, don't trust it. It's not going to be right. All it is doing is saying mathematically this is the most likely. This is the most probable word to come next in this sentence when looking at however many millions of records I've used to train it. You know, it's not thinking. It's scary because it looks like it's thinking, because it speaks like a person, it looks like a person, and language is how we kind of interpret other things. So when it looks like a person, we just assume that it's doing some big brain thinking, and it's not. It's just complicated maths.
It's just like pattern recognition.
Yeah.
And
There's no
that's
intention.
if you really
Sorry, there's no intention behind it. What it's outputting.
Exactly. So
It's like when if you ever ask it to do something within a certain word count or with a certain number of paragraphs, it won't do it because it's not thinking, it's not saying, right, okay, it doesn't generate it in a way that it thinks in that big scale. It just does next word, next word, next word, next word. So yeah, it just comes down to people need to check it. Don't do things you don't understand. Don't try and get it to do something you cannot validate and that's what I mean about kind of the Ford hitting someone, the car hitting someone, is that just because you're using a tool for something, it's still your responsibility to use it properly. You can't use it to generate an email and then go, oh well, I used ChatGPT and it didn't. Well, yeah, but you were the one that was asked to send the email, so why didn't you check that it was using the right thing? And
that's why maybe it's just better to start with using it for automation. Just stick to that, and you'll be fine.
It's too complicated. Just turn it off. No more computers. They're too complicated.
So just building on that, there is a question just follows from that. So what did the panel think about the recent call by the Musk Foundation to pause GenAI development?
I'm going to get really controversial here.
Do it. You should.
Why? I mean, what is the point in stopping innovation? I know that there is definitely inherent dangers, and it can escalate to a point where we will not be able to control it, but I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're anywhere near it. I think the dangers here is that there's not enough regulation. We don't know. No one understands it. It's still magic.
I think I'm not with you on that.
No, that's fine.
I don't know.
I don't think many people will be.
To be honest, I'm not sure if I'm with you or not. I've not made a decision on where I stand yet. But I do think that waiting till it blows up isn't the right way to go. So I do see the reason why we need to, I guess, why there might be a need to pause it. But because it's generative, you don't know where that's going to go. Like, it's constantly generating things. Like, it's pretty much a part of our lives right now. So that's really scary and really odd. It's a bit like the uncanny valley. I don't know. It just feels it's odd. So I do see why we need. I wouldn't say to recall GenAI and stop and pause it. I do think that, but I just think that it's good that we're having that conversation.
It's a very extreme response to something. It's like, no, we shouldn't stop developing it. Actually, we should develop it further and figure out ways to do it properly, rather than just. Maybe we should lock it down and make it more. The regulation needs to come in and do it all openly. So we know it's too powerful. It can't be done behind closed doors. It can't be done. Can't be done by private companies as a way. You can't have intellectual property around something like this. It's too big. It's dangerous. I think we all understand that AI is a pretty huge danger to maybe even the future of humanity. If in the way that it's going. But I don't think that going, it speaks to us now, turn it off. I think that's just the wrong. It's too much of an extreme response to something.
Yeah, I
do think there's a need for a pause, though. I think, to be honest, we've seen social media, for example. Once you get to a point where we've released that genie, it's really hard to put it back in the bottle, right? I think we should learn from that as kind of a cautionary tale, because there's very little guardrails when social media came out, along with the internet, and it's kind of a bit of a wild west. Things are improving, but it's still a long way from, I think, where it needs to be with the safeguards and the guardrails in place. So I do think there's a need for pausing, making sure that we have the right considerations around safety and ethics and the governance pieces in place before it's too late. I think once everyone's already using AI in a more widespread way, that becomes really hard then to govern.
So I think it's very interesting, this letter, because it very much has divided people, as you've already seen in this conversation. Just between the 3 or 4 of us on this side, there's a division already. I think from a Tech UK perspective, we thought it was a very interesting letter. It stimulated a lot of public debate and discussion around the future trajectory of this sort of technology. But I think it's just a bit of an unrealistic ambition. I think at this stage the genie is already out of the bottle. I think this technology is already evolving at pace considerably, and it's if we get a certain subset of individuals to say they're going to have a pause, that's not going to happen at the global level. You're going to see certain jurisdictions who maybe have different intent, a different set of ethical standards, let's put it politely, going ahead and progressing this technology at pace while we actually just stall and fall behind. So I'd completely agree with your point. I think there's a need to actually, recognise the severity of some of the issues and the risks, and actually kind of come together to be thinking about how do we take this forward in an ethical and responsible way. I think there's a point maybe over here. Do you want to come?
I was going to make a point that's very similar to yours. If the good guys don't do this, the bad guys will.
Yeah, that's the big thing. It's like nuclear disarmament. Yeah,
Exactly.
it's amazing. It would be great to have no nuclear arms, but are we going to trust the word of X, Y, and Z organisation? If we're not building it and we're not learning from it and we're not figuring it out, then like you said, malicious actors are going to figure it out, and we're going to be powerless to stop it.
You guys spoke very eloquently about the power of AI as a force for good, but it can be used against us all.
Well,
there's probably something dangerous happening right now as we speak.
There's
probably someone.
Well, the thing is, we've already seen it. Like I said, with the Dan model, the Do Anything Now model, that was a super basic hack that took. That was only 2 weeks after kind of ChatGPT had launched and become public. They already broke it. Like, malicious actors are so fast. Like, I used to work in network security and digital security, and for every person who's working as a security expert, there are 5 or 6 people trying to break your systems. And it's the same with ChatGPT. It's being used now. In fact, ChatGPT is being used to find gaps in code. It's being used to hack things because it's so easy to do.
So just building on that, another question from you, Stuart. So does it really matter the good guys, us, I guess, talk about ethics and bias when the bad guys in quotes are already busy using AI for attack vectors?
I mean, ethics is a 4,000-year-old question. We defining ethics as a thing right now is basically trying to put the limit on what we're allowed to do. And again, I'm going to start saying things people don't agree with. If we start putting boundaries on things, there's people that don't respect those boundaries, and so we're not going to do this with it, and we're not going to even investigate how we could do that. We're going to be, we're going to get hit by things we don't understand. You kind of need to know everything to be able to protect against as many things as possible. So, we need to figure out how to use it. That's not to say we need to use the bad elements of it, but we need to figure out what's there, and we need to do as much research, as much development, as much testing, as much tinkering, finding out, people aren't going to stop trying to use this. So
I think maybe we should just accept that it's going to be, there's something bad. Like, I think we should accept the bad that it could produce. Already, because like we said, it's out there already, and there are people that don't always have good intentions and are building things that could destroy us. But it's like, let's just do it. Like, I mean, it's gonna happen anyway.
It's already being used for like, again, it depends on what your ethics are, but it's already being used for things like spam emails or phishing attempts. Or I mean, I don't know how many people have got kids, but if you've ever seen any AI-generated YouTube videos for kids, I would definitely class that as using it for evil. Horrific things. But joking aside, if you can generate endless amounts of content just by running it through an AI algorithm and put it on YouTube without any regulation, without checking it, what's this? Who knows what they're putting in these AI videos that are designed for our 3-year-old kids to watch? We just don't know.
I think also it lowers the bar for entry for bad actors to do things that maybe before they didn't know how to do, but they can now go onto ChatGPT and ask me for how do I do this thing, and it will tell them. That's a pretty awful thing.
I was having a conversation with someone, he's an expert in GenAI, and I was just saying, what if someone could build an LLM off of someone, I don't know, someone that died, something. Sorry for saying that word. But someone that a family member that had passed away, and you could always kind of talk to it. Mm-hmm. But it's like, and it's probably happening right now. Like there might be a software that does that for you. Yes. And where could that get to? Like how that could be really, really dangerous.
That's not too far away, I don't think. I mean, there's already a service called Synthesia that can sort of take textual language and transfer that to text. So there's companies that are taking their onboarding processes, and rather than sort of scrolling through large amounts of text, they can watch videos with a human speaking to them.
Yeah.
It looks real, but it's just an AI bot that's been
Yeah, but
fed
then,
all
like,
the training data.
How about the person's way of speak? It could copy the way someone would speak and things like
Yeah.
that. But like, how about their opinions, for example, or like, I don't know.
Deepfake is possible now. You got
Oh, deep fakes.
speak
Yeah.
to
Yeah, yeah.
in style of Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They speak.
It exists.
Well, I mean, there's celebrities that are having, advertising built. So the people are using AI to, create an advert for either a real product or a fake product using the voice and likeness of these people, and and there's so many ethical reasons why that's bad. But it's already being done. The genie's out of the box. Everyone, it's already being done. That's the issue. Yeah.
Yes. Time for one more question.
Yeah, one more. Yeah, it's a different question.
Yeah, please change the
So
topic.
yeah,
That's a bit of a weird route.
That's one on sport.
this is an easy one. I think. So beyond the example of using Jira tickets, which is a good one, how are the panel, I guess you or your organisations maybe using GenAI to make your days more efficient?
I was actually talking to Victory before this about this. I've got ADHD, and one of the things that I struggle with is finding out how to finish a task. So I use a thing called Goblin Tools. Great name. And what you do is you say, right, okay, I need to clean the kitchen, and it'll use generative AI to tell you each task involved in that process, and you can break it down and do further things. But I now use that use it for work. I'm like, oh god, I need to do this task. I used it for an enterprise architecture thing last week. I need to do this thing. And I put it in. It's like, okay, start with this, and it just gives you a list of steps. And it doesn't do things I don't know, but it's just having something written down and having a task list rather than spending half an hour at the beginning of each day, sit down at your desk, have a cup of coffee, write your task list, figure out what you need to do that day. Well, actually, put your task list into this tool, and it gives you a list of things to do that day, and it's great. I've been using it for about a month now. I'm not going to claim that I'm more efficient than I ever was, because the problem is that with ADHD, as soon as I look away from it, it's gone. So I'd start doing something and forget it was there, and suddenly I'm taking the dog for a walk. It's definitely helped a lot there.
I think also I have dyslexia. It's part of the neurodivergent thingy section. And I have to read a lot because I work with customers. I have to read they send me a lot of emails and stuff. And it's really difficult to do all of that and do my own personal tasks as well. So I need something that will summarize, what are they trying to tell me and how do I respond to that? So I've not actually started using anything for it yet, but I was thinking I wouldn't actually use ChatGPT because it's customer data.
Yeah.
So maybe I need to build something. Maybe should I build something? I don't know.
Just
But
figure it out.
yeah, I don't have a tool. But
Any other tools?
I think for our organization, we are a very small team. We're only 4 people, and we have a junior developer. And sometimes, when you run a company, you don't have time to do everything, but you have to check their code and also deal with clients, and then search for new clients. So we use it to check their code to see what they've done, to see if what they've done is right. So that helps us speed up the process of doing it, and also it helps us bounce off ideas of what we're doing, get different, if you have different points of view, but you ask the model to sort of help you do this for you.
Interesting.
It's loads of good applications, and maybe I should take some of these tips. I mean, within the public sector, we love a good minute taker, and the ability to summarise really quickly and easily is something. Actually, that's the most tangible and tactile example that we've got so far, and it's fantastic.
It's built into MS Teams and Google now.
Yeah, like the AI minute.
Yeah, and it is great because sometimes you don't want to have to watch you've been in an hour-long meeting, you want to know. You just read through it and you can just skip past it. Okay, I need to know that. Yeah, and it's also quite good being able to go, a decision was made this meeting, was it? Yeah, I'll put that in an email and I'll remind you of that one.
I think Codurance wise, we're looking at using tools like GitHub Copilot and AWS Code Whisperer in terms of how that can make our delivery teams a bit more effective. So I think you mentioned before about some of the kind of mundane, kind of boilerplate type code that we all kind of hate to write but is required. can we use some of those tools to take some of the heavy lifting of that away from us, to allow our delivery teams to focus on some of the more value-adding activities, where the real craftsmanship, to use our term, kind of comes in. So there's kind of those choices around algorithms or architecture. That's where we want to have most of our time and effort spent. And so can we kind of free up some more of our time by using some of these tools? So we're having a few different trials of different tools right now to kind of see what's possible in that space.
It's really good for like refactoring tech debt. So if you've got if you know there's a bit of code that's causing a problem, then ChatGPT can be really good at refactoring it, especially if it's something you didn't write in a way that you don't understand, or it's just not human readable. It's it's just really messed up. You can just put it into ChatGPT, and because it doesn't read it like a person, it's quite good at being able to just, or you can take something that's not readable by a person, put it into ChatGPT, ask it to format it in a certain way, and it'll pump out actually human readable text, which is really useful.
There's a tool that actually can rewrite code in a different code. So sometimes you're moving from like Java to another language, and you put that in there, and it would rewrite that code for you. So you can imagine if you're moving from COBOL, it might run. You can use that tool to rewrite. I'm not sure what the name of the tool is. I'm trying to remember it, but I will find it and post it somewhere on LinkedIn. But it's pretty cool. You can imagine how that can change your delivery team, change your increase
we have some
innovation
teams as well that are looking at AI tooling to predictively understand which automation tests should be run on the back of some code changes. So we have normally kind of a bank of automation tests that get run as part of a production deployment or deployments. Normally we run all those tests because that's the default order. But in theory, we could be a bit smarter and say, I've only changed these components of my system, these tests need to be run. All the others, don't care about those. So there's some things there that we're looking at in terms of predictive test automation and running based on sort of code changes.
It's also really good at writing test scripts. If you're writing something, if it's something you've not built before as well, and you're like, man, how am I going to test this? Then just generating ideas. It's really good at kind of taking a blank page and adding something to it that you can then review and start working on. Once you start reading something, you go, oh yeah, actually I'd add this. It's really good for just filling a blank page and not starting just staring at an empty screen going, how am I going to begin to write this proposal? How am I going to begin to write this slide deck? How do I explain this? It's good for just kind of going, right, okay, well let's generate something. And usually you look at it and go, yeah, that's good, but I changed this, and then that's when you can start to just start adapting it. There's
also a really great podcast. I forgot who it's from, but he spoke about he trialled using ChatGPT to simulate kind of being in a team with different disciplines. So it was just him working on some code, but he wanted to sort of get experience from a security expert, a UX designer, an analyst. And so he said, imagine you're not just one chatbot, but you're four. Play these different roles, and so I'll make some code change. Hey, UX designer, what do you think? And it was sort of gradually kind of take each one's perspective and recommendations, sort of incrementally build up the code. So and not quite sure how that will work in practice, but novel idea.
Well, with GPT-4 can read images, which kind of was, I was watching the demo and it blew my mind, because what they did was they drew a picture of a web page and they said, right, build this, and it built the web page. But so now when it starts to be when it goes public and you can start to read images, okay, how does this design look like? Rate this logo. What would you change on it? And it'll be able to actually give you opinions on more things. So now it can do text. So it'll be able to do images. Eventually, it'll be able to do sound and video and whatever else. And
Great. Look, thanks very much, everyone. We're pretty much done with the event. There's a really short form, so if you wouldn't mind just scanning the QR code, just give us some feedback. That always really, really helps us. As I said, we're done, but I think most of the panel can stick around for a short while. So if you're able to as well, we've got the room, we've got some more refreshments to the back, then please do stay and chat to each other and chat to the panel members. We'd really encourage that. Look, thanks so much for coming. It's been a brilliant turnout. That's a really good question. Thanks for being so interested and so engaged in this. And last but by no means least, thanks to our panel for their time and contributions today.